I knew moving into a neighborhood with an HOA was a gamble, but I never expected the dice to land square on Karen. Her real name, Marlene Prescott. Mid-50s, bleach blonde bob, permanently squinting like she's sniffing bad milk, and of course president of the HOA, I'm Barrett Boone. Bought the corner lot on Sycamore Lane after a long stint working overseas. It was quiet, had a decent yard, and backed up to woods perfect for my dog and my sanity. The property lines were clearly marked with metal stakes, verified by a licensed surveyor before closing. I even had a copy of the official plat map framed in my garage, just in case. Turns out, just in case came sooner than I thought. One morning, I walked out to mow the lawn and noticed something was off. The stakes marking the edge of my front yard were gone, replaced by fresh ones, about 4 feet inward. My driveway looked narrower. My mailbox, suddenly sitting suspiciously close to the edge. Now, I don't believe in coincidences, so I knocked on Marlene's door. She answered like she was expecting royalty. "Oh, Barrett," she said, drawing out my name like she was tasting something sour. "Glad you stopped by. We've had to make an adjustment. Your property line was a little generous." "Funny," I replied, "because the county records say otherwise." She chuckled like I'd just told a bedtime story. "We have new HOA guidelines. The old lines didn't account for the updated easement. Your lawn extended too far onto the community's shared frontage." "Consider this a correction." I stared at her. "You mean you trespassed onto my property and moved my markers?" Marlene didn't flinch. "We're protecting neighborhood aesthetics. You'll thank us." I didn't thank her. I called my lawyer. Turns out the HOA has no legal authority to redefine property lines. Any changes like that require city approval, a court order, or formal annexation, none of which happened. My lawyer, Marcus, said, "They're bluffing, classic HOA overreach, document everything." So I did. Photos, timestamps, GPS coordinates. Even got a buddy with a drone to fly over and map the new layout. I filed a formal complaint with the city, but I wasn't done yet. Because here's the thing: Marlene doesn't just own her house. She flaunts it. Her mailbox, hand-painted and mounted on a fancy brick column, sits right where the new, fake property line now lies. So, if her rules say that land is hers, then my new lawn just became her mailbox's new home. One Saturday, while she was gone to one of her exclusive board luncheons, her words, not mine, I took a walk with my tape measure, a printed copy of the county plat map, and a shovel. Dug up her mailbox carefully, no damage. Walked it 10 feet over and planted it dead center on what she claimed was community land, but was legally still mine. I even angled it just enough so her mail would slide into the grass when opened. By the time she got home, I was back on my porch with a cold root beer and a camera rolling. Marlene stopped her car so hard her tires squealed. She marched over like a rooster in heels. "What in God's name did you do to my mailbox?" she shrieked. "Just helping you adjust to the new correction," I said. "If this is your land, then this is your mailbox." "Hope you enjoy the walk." "You can't do that." "Neither can you," I replied, holding up the paperwork. "But here we are." Her face turned the color of microwaved beets. "This is a violation of HOA policy." "And moving someone's property markers is a violation of the law," I countered. "Funny how that works." She stormed off, fuming and muttering something about calling a lawyer. I waved, then turned back inside. The best part? I wasn't even close to finished yet. By Monday morning, the neighborhood grapevine was vibrating. I didn't need to check the HOA Facebook page to know Marlene had already twisted the story. Several neighbors gave me wide-eyed looks as they walked their dogs, like I'd planted a bomb instead of a mailbox. I waved politely. Let them wonder. What they didn't know yet was that I had filed an official complaint with the county zoning office and submitted a request for a land surveyor to validate the boundaries. I wasn't just pushing back anymore. I was building a case. That afternoon, a letter arrived from the HOA, not an email. A hand-delivered envelope with a wax seal. I kid you not, Marlene had stamped it with some kind of gold emblem, probably custom ordered to make her feel like the queen of Sycamore Lane. It was a violation notice, citing me for unauthorized landscaping alterations and disruption of neighborhood harmony. A real piece of work, complete with fines totaling $600 and an order to restore community property to its prior state within 48 hours. I walked it straight to Marcus's office. He raised an eyebrow after reading it. She's either bluffing hard or she's lost her grip entirely. Could be both, I said. She used the term community property that's dangerous. If she's trying to assert ownership over your land, she's walking into legal quicksand. We drafted a cease and desist letter citing trespass, boundary encroachment, and harassment. Marcus attached copies of the original plat map, satellite imagery, and a notarized statement from the surveyor. We sent it by certified mail and emailed it to every HOA board member. The next evening, I got a knock at the door. It wasn't Marlene this time, it was Dave, the HOA treasurer. He stood like a man handling a live grenade. "Barrett, can we talk?" I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. "I didn't sign off on those new stakes," he said. "None of us did. Marlene acted on her own." "Then why hasn't the board done anything?" She told us the county approved it, said it was part of a beautification initiative. She lied. I know that now, and I'm not the only one. Half the board is furious. We found out she used HOA funds to pay a private contractor to move the markers. No permit, no board vote. I leaned against the porch rail. "That explains the sudden landscaping bill she tried to pass off last month," he nodded. "She wrote it off as curb enhancement." That was the tipping point. The next morning, I filed a formal fraud report with the city's Code Enforcement Division. Marlene had contracted work on land she didn't own, used HOA funds without authorization, and submitted false documentation to justify it. That's enough to get you removed and possibly prosecuted. 2 days later, a plain white sedan pulled into Marlene's driveway. 2 men in polo shirts stepped out, clipboards in hand, city auditors. They were followed shortly by a zoning inspector, then a sheriff's deputy. They didn't knock. They announced themselves and walked straight up to the garage where Marlene kept her little HOA command center, as she once called it. I watched from across the street as she panicked. She tried to explain something, gesturing wildly toward my property. One of the auditors pointed at the ground where the fake stakes still sat. Another handed her a document, her face drained of color. An hour later, they left with 3 boxes of files and a laptop. I wasn't expecting what came next. That evening, I got another surprise visit, this time from a woman named Rita. Late 40s, pressed navy suit, calm and professional but with a sharpness behind the eyes. She introduced herself as a senior investigator with the county fraud unit. "We're launching a full audit of the Sycamore Lane HOA," she said. "Your complaint wasn't the only one, you just happened to provide the most thorough documentation. I've got more if you need it. We do. I'd like to formally interview you." We sat at my dining table for over an hour while I laid out everything. The timeline, the surveyor's report, Marlene's violation notice, the altered stakes, even the drone footage. She asked precise questions and took meticulous notes. When she stood to leave, she paused. She's in serious trouble. Misappropriating HOA funds is one thing, but falsifying property records, that's criminal fraud. The next day, I got a call from Marcus. "Guess who just filed for emergency board protection? She's trying to shield herself. She claimed hostile retaliation from homeowners, wants the board to indemnify her against legal liability." And they voted against it. Unanimously. That night, the HOA board held an emergency meeting in the community clubhouse. For once, it was packed. Nearly every homeowner showed up, and tension hung in the air like a thunderstorm waiting to break. Marlene stood at the front with a stack of papers, trying to regain control. "This is a misunderstanding," she said. "I acted in the community's best interest." A man in the back hall, a retired firefighter, stood up. "Then why'd you forge the easement documents?" Gasps. Marlene turned pale again. "Those forms were fake," Paul continued. "My nephew works with the county clerk. There's no record of any easement changes on Sycamore Lane. Another woman, Trina, who ran the daycare down the street, held up her phone. You spent HOA funds without board approval. That's theft. Marlene tried to interrupt, but no one let her. One by one, neighbors stood up and spoke about unexplained fines, shady maintenance contracts, and sudden beautification charges. Turns out I wasn't the only one she'd targeted, just the first to fight back. Then Dave stood and read from a printed motion. Effective immediately, I moved to remove Marlene Prescott from the position of HOA president and bar her from holding any future office within this association. The vote wasn't even close. She stormed out, muttering threats no one took seriously anymore. A week later, the city filed charges: unauthorized use of public funds, falsifying legal documents, and criminal trespass. Her face made the local news blurred but recognizable enough for the neighborhood to know. The board appointed an interim president, Paul, the retired firefighter. First order of business: reimbursing every homeowner wrongfully fined under Marlene's rule. Second, hiring an independent auditor to review the HOA's finances for the past 5 years. As for my property line, the county surveyor arrived, reinstalled the original markers, and issued a formal statement confirming the boundaries. I framed that too right next to my plat map. Oh, and Marlene's mailbox. It stayed right where I moved it, until she sold the house and vanished. No farewell, no apology, just silence, fine by me. The mailbox stood untouched for weeks after Marlene's exit, half sunk in the soil, paint chipping, leaning like a forgotten relic. No one dared move it. It had become a quiet monument to her downfall, a symbol of what could happen when power met paperwork, and the paperwork won. I figured things would cool off after that. They didn't. The interim HOA board uncovered more than just questionable budgets. During the audit, they found a locked filing cabinet in the clubhouse office. One Marlene had kept the key for herself. After getting clearance from the city investigator, they forced it open. Inside were contracts. Dozens. Some handwritten, others printed, several unsigned, but all tied to landscaping, home inspections, and compliance enforcement. Most weren't authorized by any previous board. Worse, the invoices had been paid some multiple times to a company named Green Meridian. No one in the neighborhood had ever seen a Green Meridian truck. The board turned everything over to the county fraud unit. Less than 48 hours later, the sheriff's office requested a formal statement from me. Not just about the markers, but about any unusual activity I'd seen around the neighborhood during Marlene's tenure. I met them at the station and sat across from a detective named Elsie Navarro. She was sharp-eyed, mid-30s, and had a voice that made you sit straighter without realizing it. "Your footage," she said, tapping a folder, "was helpful. We noticed something strange in the background." I leaned in. "What kind of strange?" Navarro pulled out a screenshot taken from one of my drone passes, one I'd almost deleted because it didn't show the boundary clearly. Behind my lot, just on the other side of the wooded buffer, a man in a gray hoodie was loading bundles of paper into the back of a van. The van's logo, Green Meridian. "That was taken 2 days before the city audit," she said. I blinked. "I didn't even notice him." "Exactly. We think Marlene tried to destroy documents before the audit. The van was registered to a shell company. We're digging into the corporate records now." I whistled low. "So this goes beyond HOA politics." Navarro nodded. "Way beyond. We believe Marlene used her position to funnel HOA money into fake contracts, possibly over $100,000 over 5 years. And she didn't work alone. The board wasn't just dealing with fines and flowers anymore, they were sitting on potential racketeering charges." I returned home with a pit in my stomach. I hadn't realized what I'd stepped into when I moved that mailbox. What started as a petty land dispute had cracked open a full-blown criminal ring. The following week, every homeowner received a certified envelope from the county DA's office. Inside was a subpoena and a notice of a pending grand jury investigation. Marlene had been arrested that morning, booked on 5 felony charges, including wire fraud, conspiracy, and destruction of public records. And yet somehow, things kept getting worse. A neighbor from 3 houses down, Mrs. Wu, knocked on my door one evening. Quiet woman, mid-60s, always kept to herself. She held out a stack of letters. "I thought these were just HOA notices," she said, "but they're not." The letters weren't from the HOA. They were from a private collection agency demanding payments for non-compliance assessments that had never been voted on. She'd been paying them for over a year, thinking they were legitimate fines. The company, Green Meridian Financial Services. I handed the letters to the fraud unit the next morning. Within days, 10 more residents came forward with similar stories. The fraud unit connected the dots fast. Marlene had set up multiple LLCs under variations of Green Meridian, directing HOA funds into one and laundering fake fines through another. She sent real bills to real homeowners, pocketed the money, then buried the trail under fake board meeting minutes that she'd typed up herself using forged signatures. The grand jury heard enough within the first week to issue indictments not just for Marlene, but also for her nephew, who turned out to be the man from the drone footage, and her boyfriend, who had served as the silent partner on the LLC paperwork. The city froze all HOA bank accounts. The interim board was granted emergency financial oversight, and a third-party management company was brought in to help stabilize things. Meanwhile, the community rallied like I'd never seen before. Retirees like Mrs. Wu started going door to door, helping neighbors piece together their payment histories. A group of young parents put together a website to track every known fraudulent charge. The local high school's civics class got involved, creating a public timeline of the scandal and submitting it for a state competition. During all this, I mostly kept to myself. I'd already played my part. Then one afternoon, I got a call from Rita, the county investigator. "There's something you should see," she said. We met at the county records office. She laid out a file stamped with the HOA's name and a date from 3 years prior. "This is the original application for the community easement," she said. "It's fake." I flipped through it. The signatures were sloppy, the wording vague. But one part stood out, a notarized approval from someone named Gregory Tullman from the zoning board. "That name's familiar," I muttered. "It should be," she said. "He's not from zoning, he's a notary Marlene used before." "We think she forged the whole thing and used his notary stamp without consent." I leaned back. "How deep does this go?" Rita gave a tired smile. "We stopped calling it an HOA case. It's officially classified as a municipal fraud investigation now." A week later, a city council meeting was held to address the fallout. Half the neighborhood showed up. I hadn't planned to speak, but when someone asked how it all started, eyes turned to me. I stepped up to the microphone, cleared my throat, and said, "She moved my property markers, so I moved her mailbox." The room broke into laughter, not mocking, but cathartic. The kind of laugh that says, "Finally, someone said it." I added, "All I wanted was to cut my lawn without a tape measure." What I didn't expect was to uncover a criminal enterprise. The council voted unanimously to place the HOA under city oversight for the next 18 months. No new fines could be issued without independent review. All past fines were frozen pending investigation. As for Marlene, her trial was scheduled for the following spring. She faced up to 20 years if convicted. Her lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the DA wasn't having it. Too many homeowners had been wronged. Too many lies, too much theft. The new HOA board, under Paul's leadership, began rewriting the bylaws from scratch, this time with open forums, homeowner votes, and full transparency. They even installed a permanent public bulletin board outside the clubhouse with every meeting agenda posted a week in advance. And the mailbox. One morning it was gone. A moving truck pulled up to Marlene's old house, now owned by a young couple with a toddler and a rescue dog, and the last piece of her legacy was carted away. In its place, the new owners planted a sapling, a Japanese maple. small but rooted. It was a better marker than any stake, and no one dared move it. The day after the council meeting, I received a certified envelope from the county prosecutor's office. Inside was a formal request to testify in the upcoming trial as a witness to the initial property tampering incident. I had expected this, but seeing it in black and white made the weight of it real. The trial was set for the last week of October, a strange symmetry considering it would fall almost exactly 1 year after I'd bought the house. I never thought I'd be marking my first anniversary in Sycamore Lane by standing in court under oath. In the meantime, the neighborhood continued to shift. With the fraudulent fines frozen and the bylaws being rewritten under city supervision, there was a noticeable change in how people treated one another. Fences were repaired with offers of help instead of warnings. The old clubhouse, once Marlene's echo chamber, now hosted coffee mornings, chess games, even a couple of small business workshops led by residents. The air was different, less paranoid, more collaborative. Still, the deeper the investigation went, the more disturbing the discoveries became. 2 weeks before the trial, I got another call from Rita, the county fraud investigator. Her tone was clipped, more urgent than usual. We subpoenaed Marlene's personal financials. We found transfers into an offshore account. I sat down at my workbench in the garage. Let me guess. Under a different name. She used her sister-in-law's identity, the same one who passed away 4 years ago. From what we can tell, she funneled over $200,000 in HOA funds through various fake vendors, then siphoned it out through that account. She's cooked. That's not the worst of it, Rita said. We found evidence she bribed a former city registrar to falsify documents. He's already confessed. If the judge admits his testimony, she could face a federal charge. She tried to steal 4 feet of my lawn, I muttered, and it turns out she was stealing from the entire county. That's the thing about people like her, Rita said. They don't stop where the fence ends. The day of the trial, the courthouse was packed, not just with reporters and legal teams, but with residents from Sycamore Lane, many of whom had never set foot in a courtroom before. It was surreal seeing people I'd once waved at over hedges now sitting on wooden benches under fluorescent lights, waiting to see if justice would finally land. Marlene walked in wearing a gray suit 2 sizes too large and a face stripped of all its usual superiority. She didn't look at the gallery. Her lawyer, a man with thinning hair and a jaw that never quite closed, barely spoke to her as they sat down. When I was called to the stand, I kept my testimony simple and factual. How I'd noticed the markers moved, how she'd claimed the land was part of a revised easement, how I'd responded by relocating her mailbox, and how that act, petty as it seemed at the time, had triggered the unraveling of everything. The prosecution played the drone footage. They showed the altered plat documents. They introduced the statements from the notary whose signature had been forged. Then they brought in the city registrar, who admitted to accepting cash in exchange for falsifying the easement record. But the real turning point came when Mrs. Wu testified. She brought with her a folder of letters, payment receipts, and a handwritten note Marlene had once slipped into her mailbox reading, "Compliance is peace." The jury audibly reacted when they saw the fine print on one of the letters. Failure to pay may result in lien placement. The prosecution confirmed no such authority had ever existed in the HOA bylaws. That broke something in the room. By the 3rd day, Marlene's lawyer attempted to negotiate a plea deal. The DA refused. The judge denied the motion to delay. Trial continued. On the 4th day, the defense tried to argue that Marlene had acted under the impression that the board had granted her emergency powers. But the board's own meeting minutes, recovered from the cloud server a tech-savvy neighbor had rebuilt from metadata, showed no such vote, only a series of one-on-one emails Marlene had sent to board members, each referencing urgent action and verbal consensus. The jury deliberated for less than 6 hours. Guilty on all counts, mail fraud, wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy, falsifying public records, and abuse of fiduciary duty. The judge ordered immediate remand pending sentencing outside the courthouse. Reporters swarmed. I kept my head down, but a few neighbors stopped me, shook my hand, and thanked me not because I'd exposed her, but because I hadn't let it go. That night, the neighborhood threw a block party, not in celebration of Marlene's downfall, but in relief. Kids played in yards that had once been measured with suspicion. Paul grilled burgers. Trina brought out cupcakes shaped like tiny mailboxes. Someone even made a sign that read, "Property lines, verified and respected." I kept to the edge watching. A man I hadn't seen before approached. Late 30s, sleeves rolled to the elbow, clipboard in hand. "You Barrett?" he asked. "Depends who's asking." "I'm from the county's Neighborhood Recovery Grant Office. We're putting together a pilot program for HOAs that have experienced mismanagement or fraud, Sycamore Lanes being considered. If you're interested, we'd like you to sit on the advisory panel." I raised an eyebrow. "You want the guy who moved a mailbox out of spite to help rebuild HOA trust," he chuckled. "You moved the right mailbox at the right time." I agreed to meet with them. Not because I wanted another fight, but because I'd learned something in all of this. The only way to keep power from corrupting is to keep it in the open, where everyone can see it. 3 months later, Marlene was sentenced to 12 years in state prison, with eligibility for parole after 8. Her assets were seized to repay restitution, including the funds she had funneled out of the HOA. Her house was auctioned, the proceeds split between victims. The new HOA bylaws, written with input from residents and reviewed by the city, included strict term limits, financial transparency requirements, and a provision that any board decision involving more than $500 required a public vote. The mailbox, still gone. But in its place, the new owners of Marlene's house installed a bird feeder. It hung from a curved metal pole just inside the original property line. The birds didn't care about easements or bylaws, they just came and went, and for the first time since I moved in, so did peace. No tape measures. No envelopes with gold seals, just neighbors, living like neighbors again.